Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Gurnam, it's a very emotional week this week, especially for non-Sikhs and Sikhs.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very emotional week for a lot of people. From you remember on Tuesday, all over the UK, we were celebrating the cenotaph and other places, the Armistice Day. And जिस तरह कि अभी सिक्खा वास्ते भी बहुत बड़ा हफ्ता है और नॉन सिक्खा वास्ते भी है. On Tuesday, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we saw throughout the UK and Europe a 2-minute silence, honouring all those killed in conflicts since the start of World War I, known as the Armistice Day. In London, we had a very emotional remembrance ceremony at Westminster Abbey, the Cenotaph on Trafalgar Square. But there was this amazing spectacle. I think some of you will have maybe visited that. It's where we've got nearly 900,000 ceramic poppies at the Tower of London, representing the kind of blood-swept lands and seas of Red and the death of a British and Commonwealth soldier during the First World War. It's a very moving exhibition there, and certainly if you haven't seen that exhibition at Tower of London, I think they're dismantling it now, but certainly get down there. Of course, you know, this day is not just about the UK, it's about the whole of Europe, in fact, the whole of the world. In France, the President Francois Hollande laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier under the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and in Belgium, in the town of Ypres at the Menheim Gate, where there's a very special memorial to the many thousands of Sikhs that fell and other soldiers in that part of Europe, in Belgium. There was a special, very special last post ceremony held. So, you know, although this is the amazing thing, Manjit, although only 2% of the Indian population, in fact, the pre-partition Indian population, possibly less than 2%, maybe 1%, were Sikhs, they made up 20% of the British Indian Army, which is phenomenal. Which I think at its peak, the British Indian Army was something like 4 million. So it's up to 1 million Sikhs served in the army, which possibly was maybe 30% of the entire Sikh population. So there were very few Sikh households that didn't have somebody in the military. And at the beginning of the First World War, Sikhs in the British Army totaled 100,000. And as I said, many of them laid down their lives and fought in battalions in Egypt, Palestine, Mesopotamia, Gallipoli in France. And we will be hearing about some of these things, and if you look at some of the images that we're displaying. 6 battalions of the Sikh regiment were raised in World War II. And they served in El Alamein and in Burma, Italy and Iraq. And Italy ਦੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨਵੇਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਇਟਲੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਇਟਲੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਬਾਬਿਆਂ ਪੜਦਾਦਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤਾਂ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਇਟਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ. Same thing in France. So you go and discover your history, find out, and I know that there are now memorials in Italy and in France and other places. And over the 2 world wars, an amazing 83,000 turban-wearing Sikhs gave their lives, and over 110,000 were wounded. Again, a very high casualty rate, yeah? So today's show really is focusing, as you were saying, it's a very emotional day. It's going to focus on all of these events and really the role of Sikhs in war. And, you know, it's a very special program. We've got some very special guests, so I think we should. Shall we introduce the guests? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start on my right-hand side. मैं सज्जिया तो शुरू करना by Gurpal Singh ji. By Gurpal Singh ji is from the National Sikh Museum in Derby, and next to Gurpal Singh we have Timothy Lane, who is a military historian and also is involved with Gurpal in Derby at the National Sikh Museum. If I go on to my left, I've got on first by Jagmohan Singh. Very dear friend of mine. He's got many contributions, but Jagmohan Singh served in the British Army. He served in Iraq, and I think he also served in Afghanistan. Next to Jagmohan, we have Hardeep Singh Bhatt, who is from the UK Punjab Heritage Association. And you know something about the exhibition that's been running at the Brunei Gallery in London, and we went to see that. We actually did a documentary. It's absolutely phenomenal, and we'll be hearing about the kind of work that they've been doing and some of the impact, because we really want to know what impact that has. And next to Hardeep, we have another Gurpal Singh. Gurpal Singh, who is an educationalist and also amateur Sikh historian. So we've got a really fantastic team here today. Excellent. So I think everybody, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just imagine, this is the first round. I think, you know, as you were saying, it's a very emotional week.
Of course it is.
And we all have personal connections. I mean, my grandfather served in the army as well. He was a linguist in the First World War. And he used to write beautiful letters to me and things like that. So we all have memories, but can we maybe start, Jagmohan Singh ji, you know, what kind of emotions, what kind of thoughts do you have when we think about this phenomenal contribution of Sikhs in the wars and subsequently as well, because you've served in wars as well?
Doctor, I think you answer your question, yeah. Because I serve in the army, so I go those connections, yeah. When I actually started the army training, so I was the only Sikh in my whole battalion. So they used to question me like why I'm different, why I'm shaving. Or army rules, probably Tim will explain you later. They're very strict about shaving and stuff. So they used to ask me why I'm allowed to keep my kara or why I'm allowed to keep my kirpan on when they're not when my fellow colleagues wasn't allowed to keep their religious symbols. So I think I'd start doing some research.
It's tragic because the British Army itself have forgotten their own history.
Yeah. So
at the time when the Sikhs were not questioned about these things, quite the contrary.
I mean, like, I think so. I had to do some research, and World War I was the start. So I went online, I did some research, printed some pictures. So I have to do some presentations as well, because when I started my training and even my instructors were a bit concerned. They were like, just make sure we don't want to offend you. And I was like, look, Sikhs don't get offended very quickly. Yeah? So you can ask me anything. You can treat me like your normal guys. So I'm very emotionally attached with this. And I remember an incident actually, why actually every year I actually take time off to go to these Remembrance Days, you know. I met a lady actually while I was traveling back to Purbright, my training. I met a lady, like a white lady, and she asked me a few questions about what would I do, like am I a student or so. But actually I was hiding my identity because I was serving in the forces. But I was advised by my by trainers, look, don't disclose on the trains because there was some IRA threat at that time. Yeah. So actually she told me a story that in World War II actually, yeah, one of the Sikhs actually, I think they had like hand-to-hand fight with Germans in Belgium, yeah, and actually one of the Sikhs actually sacrificed his life to save his dad's life. So when I told her that actually I'm serving in the British Army, actually she forced me to have a cup of coffee with her. She actually made me to on board my train. I said, look, at Oxford Station, yeah. So I think after that day, actually every year.
Well, it is phenomenal. Yeah. If you go to Ypres and you find the local villagers, the elder people, they embrace you. They see Sikhs as liberators and freedom. Now, Jagmohan, you've got a couple of badges there. Just tell us a bit about the badges as well.
Actually, as you mentioned before, they are serving in Afghanistan. So one badge is for serving in Afghanistan, and one is for working with the NATO forces. So because I spent a year, I did 2 operational tours, Operation Opharik 6 and Opharik 8. I will talk about my experience later on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Tell us about because you was going to get a third one as well, a third badge.
I mean, like, to qualify for your medals, you have to serve certain time. Mm-hmm. So I served in Middle East somewhere else. I didn't qualify for that area. Okay. So because they moved, because one of my friend actually, he has some sort of, he has to come back due to some, I would say, welfare reasons from Afghanistan. Because I think his wife was pregnant, so the army is very good with when it comes to welfare. It doesn't matter where you're serving; they always try to accommodate your personal life as well. So actually, I missed that one, but so
that's great. Yeah. That's great. Okay, Hardeep. Later on, we are going to talk about the exhibition and some of the work you've been doing there. But just before that, I mean, you are involved with the UK Punjab Heritage Association, and you're also a member of the Empire Faith and War Project Board. You know, what is it that inspires you to getting interested, engaged in this kind of stuff? You know, what is it about your own Sikh identity or your own remembrance of your own history? What's the kind of thing that inspires you?
I think the answer is pretty simple. It is my kids. I want to make sure my children, when the Remembrance Sundays and the 2-minute silences are held and they are observed, they don't feel excluded. I want to make sure they understand that what their heritage is, what their forefathers have done, what their ancestors have done for this country and for the world. So that I think, I mean, if you want to boil it down to one point, and I think that's pretty much it. If I can ensure my kids feel part of this country, they feel that they belong, they're ancestors have sacrificed their lives for this country. They can
What about
hold
your
their head.
ancestors? I mean, have you studied your own kind of lineage and discovered anything interesting?
Well, as we've tried, and there is unfortunately no direct connection with World War One in my family. However, there is a connection from my mum's side. My mum's grandfather was on the Kamakata Maru ship, which then was turned back from Canada, and part of that was, it kind of inspired the Gada movement, and it was infiltrated. So that's the other, and that's
we'll
the other
pick that
part.
question up in a second half.
And so I have family
That's great.
links on the other side. But I mean, as part of the Empire Faith War project, what we are trying to do is we are trying to uncover the whole story, not just the participation on the army, on the war side, but also on the other side, on the freedom fighter struggle and the families that were left behind, and the impact the war had on women, children, the families, the society in general. And that, hopefully we're uncovering some amazing stuff, and hopefully with your help and with the help of the other organizations, we can reach out to a number of people to uncover further.
Amazing things that you've uncovered, which I think, some of those images they're in books and things, but is those sound archives from Germany,
Yes.
from the concentration prison.
Amazing.
Tell us a bit about that, because that's phenomenal stuff.
So the Germans had this campaign, and they had this camp outside Berlin called Harpoon Camp, and that's where the POWs were kept. The Germans had sort of this drive, this propaganda that they were working on to actually primarily to target the Muslim soldiers, so that they could initiate jihad. So they had this whole thing with the Ottoman Empire, which was joining Germany, and they were kind of hoping that all of the Muslim population will join them, and they will desert the British Indian Army and join them on their side. And it was a failure of an experiment. It didn't quite work. And in those camps, they also had Sikhs and other Hindus. But what they did do was something really amazing. It was they did this ethnography and other studies on the POWs, and they tried to understand what makes Sikhs what makes us special, what makes them warrior, what makes them difficult to beat. What is this myth about the Sikh warrior soldier? And they studied all sorts of things.
What does the archive reveal? That's
fine.
Actually, the study is inconclusive. I mean, the data is spread all over. There's no kind of particular kind of sample data. It's from all over the place. It doesn't really tell you anything. There are a couple of things it does reveal, which are personally, they're quite disturbing. One of the things that they did was they kind of asked the POWs, how many brothers, sisters do you have? How many sons, daughters do you have? And the numbers don't really tell you a good story. And you can see what's happening. The ratio of male to female is is quite high. So which is quite disturbing. But the sound archives that they've captured, and we found them in this museum in Berlin, and we got them over.
So the
as part of the
University, isn't it? The Humboldt University.
Absolutely, and it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, you can hear folk songs, and you can hear these guys talking about their experiences, and they're talking about stuff that's folklore, and they some of them are singing shabds, and some of them are telling stories, and for us to be able to listen to a sound archive 100 years ago.
And the dialect as well. There's lots of, it's like an archive of those village dialects that Punjabi
Absolutely.
that we're losing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one other thing, and then I'm going to move on to Gurpal. The project that you've been involved in, I think it got national lottery funding up to about £500,000, so lots of money points there. What kind of impact have you had?
So we've had as you know, it's heritage lottery funded, and it's the project's a 3-year project, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to uncover the stories of our heritage, our ancestors, and it's a story that's been forgotten by India. It's a story that's been forgotten by Britain, because it's a colonial past, doesn't sit comfortably with either. When Britain gave independence to India, or India gained independence from Britain, Britain said, well, it's your story, it's your commemoration, you commemorate it. And India sort of took it over and said, well, it's kind of sits uncomfortably. These guys fought for the empire. It doesn't quite work. But we have a duty to our forefathers to, we're not here to judge. We're here to just uncover the truth, the whole truth.
And basically digging all the history out.
We are trying to create this history. We are trying to create this archive because, as you know, most of the soldiers were illiterate. They couldn't read and write. So a lot of
were they a conscript army or were they a voluntary army?
Well, it's a complex question. It's a complex answer to a very simple question. In theory, the whole of the British Indian Army was a volunteer army. So
but
there
these
was no
were poor people in the villages, so really...
Exactly. So that's where the difficulty comes in, because a lot of them fought for kind of the bravery aspect, the
adventure.
Adventure.
Because
guns,
a lot of the publicists and
absolutely.
posters were presenting it as
Exactly.
an amazing adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them, big guns, boys and guns, right? And that's one. So that's adventure.
And we've got some examples here.
We've got some
we're talking
examples
about.
there, absolutely. And the others were, there were whole sort of kind of parts to play here. The civil administration, the government, the Maharajas, the whole administration was sort of working with the British to kind of glorify the war, to kind of enlist them. The Tahsildars, the Lambardars from the village, and they were all sort of paid a booty to kind of make sure you supply me 100 men a month or 10 men a month from every village or whatever. And and some of them, don't forget, some of them fought for enlisted for status. It changed lives. And this was not the start of enlisting in the Sikh regiments or to fight under the British Army. The Sikh regiments were formed right in 1846. The first one was raised, right, at the outbreak of the First Anglo-Sikh War. So they had a amazing history and heritage of this.
Yeah.
We'll come back to some of the other stuff. I just want to Gurpal. I want to kind of, because you mentioned the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and this is a good segue to Gurpal, really, because he's a historian of that whole period. Yeah? Now, let me come to that point, because we do always romanticize the past, and maybe there's a good reason to do that as well. And in the exhibition that we've seen at SOAS, there are some posters around the race theories and the Germans were into that big time, but even the British were. To what extent is this idea of the martial race itself a propaganda tool, a recruitment tool? And to what extent is it a reality? Because we fought 2 bloody wars with the British, so they knew that the Sikhs can fight. So where do you kind of make sense of that?
Well, I think it very much went to the advantage of the British to come up with that sort of theory. Yes, there is some evidence, historical evidence, to say that from the time of the Gurus, Guru Hargobind, Guru Gobind Singh Ji,
we were certainly a fighting force.
Were certainly a fighting force and played a major role in getting rid of the Mughal Empire. There's no doubt about that. I think the British, during the eve of the Anglo-Sikh War, were in great awe and admiration of the Sikhs, and you can see that expressed in their official dispatches, their letters, the history of the period, that they were in awe of their fighting ability, and I think they wanted to harness that, and they did do that in a small way. I think with great caution they took Sikh recruits after the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and they were still suspicious. There were lots of things happening in the background in terms of rebellion. There was Bhai Maharaj
But that's
Singh
strange,
and so
though,
on.
because on the other hand, I've seen some archival footage where Sikh soldiers have been guarding Churchill. They trusted them so much that I think there was a meeting, I don't know, somewhere in Germany, where all the top leaders of all were guarded by Sikh soldiers. Maybe they're the only ones that they did trust.
That was much later on, Gurnam. It wasn't until the actual
Second.
Indian mutiny that they realised they could rely on the Sikhs and the Punjabi
loyalty.
Muslimans as well. And their loyalty, and it was after that moment that there was wholesale recruitment en masse into the army, and of course, King George's 14th own Firozpur Sikhs, who won so many, gallantry.
Is there
awards
any
and so
evidence
on
of any
and battalions.
uprisings, any mutinies, revolts in the time of the British India Army,
There
we know
was
about
one.
There was one.
There was one, and it was during the time, it was in Bombay, and it was during the time of the sort of Ghadar rebellion and the Babrak Ali
Okay,
movement
that we're
and
going
so
back
on.
to Wal's territory now. There,
And of course, there was also some influence on the Sikh
but not in the
soldiers
battlefield.
from
There's-
Mohan Singh and the Indian National Army.
No,
as
no, no.
well.
We know that's a different. That's a different war. That's
Yes.
a different theatre. In Europe, is there any evidence of any Sikh soldiers actually saying, "We're going to fight for you"?
Not to my
So
knowledge.
they were totally
and I
loyal.
don't think.
Habal, was there
There's
total
any-
loyalty there? Did you?
I think, I think that's a difficult one to answer because I think there might have been a bit of desertion, but the desertion was, and the desertion rate.
And the penalty for desertion was death.
Yeah,
You get
absolutely.
shot dead.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And I don't think the numbers were any lower or higher
Okay.
than the norm. But I don't think there is any mass kind of mutiny, rebellion. No.
Just quickly comment that because I mean.
Yeah, actually, I just want to add that,
Then we'll come
in
over.
Battle of New Chapel, about 138,000 Sikhs went, and 80% of them lost their lives, So I can't see it happening there. But there's some letters, if you go online, the data is available. Just for Punjabi ਚ ਵੀ ਕਹਿ ਦਵਾਂ ਕਈ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੰਪਾਇਰ ਨਾਲ ਗਦਾਰੀ ਕਰੂਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਕਿੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਥੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਿਤੇ ਸਿੱਧਾ ਨਰਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਲਾਈਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਿੱਖਸ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ I will rather die on the battlefield, as Guru Sahib Bani says. Ab jab aab ki yaad मैदान बने.
Because they took oath on Guru Granth Sahib.
Yeah. So
Wasn't that another very clever strategy? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Was that a clever strategy by the British to really tie them down?
It
Tie their
potentially
loyalty
was.
down?
It worked, right?
It worked.
It worked. I mean, I don't know whether it was conscious decision or not, and I'm not an expert in that, but I can say it worked, right?
Okay.
So
let's see if Gopal thinks it.
Well, I think it's part of the Sikh tradition to take oath on
So
Guru
wherever
Granth Sahib,
wherever
do
battlefield,
ardas
yeah.
before the
Yeah.
war. I think that's part of the tradition.
Okay.
I just want to give a reference from a letter written by Mohan Singh. He said, thanks to Sardar Bhutta Singh of Rawalpindi for sending a copy of Sri
So
Guru
this
Granth
is by
Sahib Ji.
Monty. He's a soldier.
He was soldier in World War One, so he was actually
In Europe?
he wrote a letter to his younger brother saying, look, thanks to Sardar Bhutta Singh of Rawalpindi for sending the Guru Granth Sahib, so that now we can pray on the battlefield. So
And firstly, you've got the Ek Inchi Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Ek Inchi, they produced a few, didn't they?
They did, and I think that happened as the war progressed. They printed this miniature Guru Granth Sahibs with the magnifying glass, which the soldiers were able to tuck into their turbans. And they were, I mean, the amazing thing about this war, which we keep discovering new facts, is the soldiers would lose their Khande Kurbana, which is, their symbols of their faith and their kare and stuff. And they would be writing home letters like that, can you please send me my Khandab, and I've lost it and stuff. What the British Army then did was they manufactured these items of Sikh faith in Sheffield and shipped them through supply
Wow,
lines,
that's amazing.
Do you have any,
which they could kind of get.
Names of companies
Yeah.
are they still existing? Have we got any archive?
I'm sure there's a lot of data
Well,
on it, but
now
we
the
can find out.
Sheffield, if
I don't
anybody,
know that to hand.
any Sikhs watching from Sheffield or South Yorkshire, here's a project for you. Go and find out. Go to the local museums and find out about Sheffield forgers who are making weapons, Sikh traditional kind of.
And wouldn't that be an amazing
Amazing.
story
Yeah, of course it would
to
be.
kind of become part of our citizen historian database, which is, again, as I said about the project, we are uncovering.
Just
and
quickly tell us about the
creating-
citizen historian, then we're going to go over
So,
to...
as part of the 3-year project that we have embarked on, and the exhibition was the launch of that. What we are doing is we are uncovering stories in our families, in our community, to document that history which has been lost and forgotten, and we're creating a database with as much information as we can put in it, and then as part of our Every Soldier Remembered project, the wider Imperial War Museum Every Soldier Remembered project, we will be handing over that database to become part of that.
And how many
that,
people have so far signed up to
so
that?
we've had about about 500 odd people sign up, and this is our chance now, because up until now we've been saying, well, you know, everybody's forgotten our history, nobody's written it.
This is
Now
your
is your
chance.
chance
To-
Punjabi ਚ ਵੀ
it's
ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ
World
ਜਿਹਾ-
War One
ਹਾਂਜੀ,
ਤੁਸੀਂ
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਵੀ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਦੱਸਦਾ straight to the camera
Yeah.
So ਪਹਿਲੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਜਾਂ ਦੂਜੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਵੀ ਫਰਸਟ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ ਜਾਂ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ ਚ ਵੀ but ਫਰਸਟ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ ਮੇਨਲੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਫੋਕਸ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਕੋਈ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ, ਕੋਈ ਮੈਡਲਸ, ਕੋਈ ਲੈਟਰਸ, ਕੋਈ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ, ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਚਲਾਉਣਾ ਆਉਂਦਾ, ਤੇ empirefaithwar.com ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ। ਇਹ 3 ਸਾਲ ਚੱਲਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਡਾਕੂਮੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਮੇਰੇ ਵਰਗੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਡੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਿਆ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ, ਸਾਡੇ ਏਰੀਏ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਂ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਡੇਟਾਬੇਸ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੋਈ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਬਣੇ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਰੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਲਈ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਮਿਊਜ਼ੀਅਮ ਨੂੰ, ਇੰਪੀਰੀਅਲ ਵਾਰ ਮਿਊਜ਼ੀਅਮ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਂਡ ਓਵਰ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੀ ਹੈ ਪਰਮਾਨੈਂਟ ਡਿਸਪਲੇ ਲਈ। ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ 100 ਸਾਲ 200 ਸਾਲ ਬਾਅਦ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਕੋਈ ਲੁੱਕ ਅਪ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੂਗਾ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਲੁੱਕ ਅਪ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਤੇ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ on their basis, on their goodwill are we today saying that what good jobs, deeds that they did. Now it's our duty to kind of document
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਮੈਂ
that.
ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੇ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਤਾਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਫੁੱਲਤ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਸਿੱਖੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਚਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਤਾਂ ਆਹ ਦੇਖੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਵਧੀਆ ਮੌਕਾ, what a great opportunity we have to make a real difference. So ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਜਾਓ and you enter your details. ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗਾ, ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਪਿਕਚਰ ਬਣਾ ਲੈਣੀ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਹੈਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗਵਾਚਾ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਰੱਖਿਆ, ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਬਲਿਸ਼ ਕਰੂਗੇ। So that's fantastic.
So you can just add
last
to
point,
that.
then we're going to go on.
Just add to that. Not just people who fought in the war, but we also want to uncover stories that were people left behind, families left behind, women. How were they, if there's anything, and also please ask. Please, ਆਪਣੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੋ, ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੋ.
All the history will go with them.
Absolutely. Otherwise, history is.
That's fantastic. So there you are. Amazing stuff. Thanks very much, Hardeep. And we'll come back and talk more about some of this work. I'm now going to turn over to my colleagues on the right, both doing amazing, fantastic work from the National Sikh Museum in Derby. I think the Sikh Museum has only been going for a few years, but from very humble beginnings, it has really been a phenomenal impact and has become the primary focus for Sikh artifact history in the UK. And as you can see, some of the artifacts connected with the First World War, our colleagues have brought, and they will be talking a bit about this. So I'm just going to come to you first, Gurpal Singh ji. Again, thanks very much for coming and sharing some of your experience. What's your kind of connection with that history, and what is it that inspires you guys to do this work, and what is the work that you're doing?
Well, main things I wanted to say, they're next to all. So,
Well, you've got the weapons.
we've got the hard artifacts.
We've got the old
Yeah,
Like
we've
to
got
look at that.
yes, we've got the hard artifacts that will actually remain here forever and ever. It's forgotten history, as you started the subject with, that things that we as Sikhs had forgotten, and naturally throughout history these things have been forgotten, and no one ever told us anything about the contribution of the Sikhs into the First and Second World War. Like more than 83,000 turban-wearing Sikhs actually died for Britain, and that is our contribution. That is a big number. That is a big number for one single community being a minority. Less than like 1.5%, maybe it's 2% now. And for them to actually contribute up to 22% into the British Indian Army by the Second World War, that was a phenomenal number. And what we are doing...
In a sense, if you talk about it in actual terms, half of the Sikh nation was given to the war.
There was.
In proportionate terms.
As a martial race, obviously that's what we have. You were talking about deserting and stuff. There's no question about that. Once a Sikh has sworn on the Guru Granth Sahib, sanu ਦੱਸਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਵੀ ਕਹਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੱਜ ਪਈ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਕੀ ਤੇ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਕੀ. ਚਮਕੌਰ ਦੀ ਗੜੀ was one of the first examples, and then the same thing was repeated in ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੜੀ ਸੀ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਯਾਦ ਨਹੀਂ, ਸਾਰਾ ਗੜੀ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਜੀ, ਸਾਰਾ ਗੜੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 10,000, same thing. So history,
ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਿਊਅਰ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਢਾਡੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਮਸਾਲਾ ਲਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਬੜੀ ਆਦਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਇੱਥੇ ਕੋਈ ਮਿਸਾਲਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਅਸੀਂ
It's
ਮਿਥਿਹਾਸ
reality.
we're not
Yeah.
talking about mythology we're talking about history
ਇਤਿਹਾਸ।
we talk about reality and ਇੱਕ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੱਕ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਕਰੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਕਹਾਣੀਆਂ ਬਣਾਵੇ you go out and find out
Yeah.
if there are any evidence of Sikhs ever betraying or leaving the battlefield and I don't think you will find any.
There was actually, I think the Germans had captured some Sikhs by mistake, thinking that they were actually from belonging to the Muslim religion. So they captured them, they took them to Turkey, and they got them to fight for them. But then what those Sikhs did, because they were loyal, they had sworn, they had already taken the oath of Guru Granth Sahib, they had escaped to Afghanistan, and then through there, to India and wherever the British empires were fighting from, and they joined back with our allied forces. So
Okay, Tim, we're all kind of biased. We would say Sikhs are great.
Well, I think they are.
You're kind of, in a sense, got an outsider's perspective, and you obviously have got immense interest and respect for the Sikh tradition and the Sikh tradition. Tell us a bit about your own views about some of this, and tell us something about the weapons as well. Yeah.
Well, I got in connection with the museum about 5 years ago into Kabul, and I just admired the Sikhs, how brave they were in both wars, and I was asked to help, and I've been there ever since, and I brought a lot of my weapons and artefacts from First World War.
Now, this uniform itself is from the First World War.
Yeah, this is an actual First World War uniform, and the Sikhs, some of the Sikhs would have worn the same
But
uniform.
they would have these kurtas as well, wouldn't they? Because they've got one exhibition. They specially sewed these garments for the Sikh soldiers, weren't they? It was like
Yeah. They were varied, but they had the same equipment basically as the ordinary British infantry.
So tell us about this. I mean, in the film we call these Tommy guns, but
No.
more of a sophisticated name for this.
That's called a Lewis gun,
Yeah.
which was a medium machine gun. That had a rate of fire of 500 rounds a minute,
Yeah.
which was a quite effective weapon.
So you would have seen these in the battles in Belgium in the First World War?
All over the
in the trenches?
theatres of First World War, they were there.
So Sikhs would have been...
Sikhs would have been using them, yeah.
And what is what's the provenance of this weapon itself? Is it from...
Yeah, that's actually,
from
that's a
European
1917 one. So it's basically, it'll have served in the latter part of World War One, but it's no different to the earlier models.
And there's another rifle here as well.
That's the short magazine Lee Enfield, which every infantryman in the British Army had them. Very reliable, very effective. Had a killing range of about 2,500 to 3,000 yards.
And very heavy as well. To carry some of these weapons you needed to be pretty strong.
Yeah, but they were young lads, weren't they? They were fit, and
And if you, the scroll is running, and so you will see these images flashing, and those weapons that these soldiers are carrying, these are the actual weapons. These were the weapons that were army regulation, were they for all infantry? These were.
yeah, infantry.
I mean, you did say they were fit. In what sense? Like in the eating, or they were eating, or physically?
Well, physically, I would
like
imagine most.
Yeah.
I mean, most soldiers were fit, and Sikhs were warriors, and they had the fighting spirit, didn't they?
But tragically, again, in your exhibition, you talked about the way in which actually many soldiers died of illness, didn't they? More died of illness in I think in Mesopotamia. More died of the conditions than actually died on the battlefield. So there is that other side of.
There's. There are quite a few other sides. So the Turks killed 4 times as many Indians than the Germans did. The more a lot of Sikhs died as part of illness, dysentery, of being kind of starved and marched to kind of prison camps.
So they didn't have enough food, you mean?
Well,
to keep on going.
Not normally, but in this one particular instance, there's a siege. A siege of Kut is called, and there was a siege which ensued for about 4.5-5 months, and they were then surrounded by the Ottoman forces.
So
and
where was it, in Mesopotamia?
That was a siege of Kut. It was Turkey, right?
Turkey, So how many Sikhs was it? A regiment that was trapped?
So it was not just Sikhs. So it was a large number, mixed. Of Sikhs, Hindus, and British forces. I think there were Muslims as well, but yeah, it's and the Allied forces. So and they were they marched up the Tigris. They took the first few towns, and they wanted to take Baghdad. It was an ill-fated, sort of ill-conceived strategy, which backfired because the Ottomans, regrouped outside of Baghdad, and they kind of, forced.
And they knew the terrain as well.
And they knew the terrain. It was hot. It was quite kind of, it was difficult terrain. The supply lines were not in place, and they kind of, got ahead of themselves because the general who was, or the leader who was in charge, Townsend, he kind of either he was given the wrong sort of orders, or he executed a wrong strategy. I don't know enough details, but he kind of led the troops up. And then they had to fall back, and then the siege ensued, and then they were eventually had to surrender because of lack of food, and they had to eat their horses and stuff. And then they were, whoever was left, they were marched 1,000-mile march to a prison camp, and they were, exhausted
in the desert.
In the desert,
Oh, God.
right? It was
And the
terrible.
thirst as well, the water. I mean,
absolutely.
Jumon, you were going to come in
Well,
because you
as for
yourself have been in the battlefield, and so you know something about survival.
I was saying, as Benji asked about fitness, I think physical fitness counts, but I think it's mental fitness as well.
Yeah.
So it's not
Mind over matter,
I've been to Belgium, seen the trenches there, but it's hard to imagine. I think at the start of the war, probably team had done so much research. The party has done so much research as well. They started the war with one-man trenches, if I'm right, or maybe, and they actually did a survey there. Look, about 40% soldiers are failing to fire when they see every time the German charges. So about 40% are firing the weapons. So then they actually put 4 men together. They said, look, out of 4, 1 will fire the first round. It's not about the last round; it's about firing the first round. So even today, I can't talk about.
So you're talking about the focus, keeping the focus.
As they're saying, Bhutta Singh said that Singh sent me this Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Yeah. So probably I can feel their relief. They have, after having that Guru Granth Sahib, after probably the Gurbani give you spiritual guidance and strength as well. Yeah?
Strength.
So there's a letter again, like a soldier telling his wife, look,
Punjabi ਚ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੀ ਵਾਈਫ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਬਿਸਕਟ ਖਾਓ ਐਂਡ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਪਰ ਲੋਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਿਸਕਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜੀ ਸਕਦੇ we want chapatis
roti pani.
And initially the army said it's not possible to get
that type of food.
So but in end I think the French people, they brought atta for them, and they talk about equality as well. There's a letter by Isha Singh. He said, look, the people are they behaving like they're treating us equally. Even in the hospital, they're talking about people, the kings coming, like bringing them flowers. He said, look, they're not treating us like a second class. I think I was shocked, when I went to the army, and
So there was a lot of support and sympathy.
The amount of respect I was getting. I went to Sanders Academy I think I spent about a month there, and as I'm walking through all these big
Because the
rooms,
first room is the India room.
Yeah,
India room, isn't it? Yeah.
and I remember one of my troop commander telling me stories. He said, look, most of these Victoria crosses, I'm not being like I was telling any lies here, but I said, look, most of these Victoria crosses was won with Sikh
Sikhs.
battalion.
Yeah, they were.
But I said, like, the officers was like because at that time the Sikhs was not allowed to be an officer or something like that. So it's like that's why most of the officers were getting these Victoria crosses. But the soldier who was actually doing the most of the fighting was Sikhs.
I mean, that is phenomenal, Tim. I mean, it's phenomenal the amount of Victoria Crosses that the Sikhs actually were awarded.
Yeah.
The bravery.
I think it was sheer bravery, the individual soldier, wasn't it? There was such a fierce.
I think
It's just but one other thing, and we're going to go to a break in a minute. But actually, there's a couple of things I wanted to pick up with you as well. Just tell the viewers what was life like in the trenches. We talked about shell shock. We talked, not only were there bombs, there were kind of gas being.
There were gas attacks, mustard gas. Shell shock, and it's hard to explain.
It must be like a trauma.
Yeah, well, it would have been, wouldn't it?
It's probably about the nearest that you can get to hell on earth.
Yeah. Must have a lot of trauma.
Okay, just one last thing, because you mentioned about the soldiers and chapatis, yeah?
Yeah.
There's another picture in the exhibition which is, again, quite interesting, which is of Sikh soldiers with traditional musical instruments and bhajan things, and again, that they brought them to the Kirtan, and there's another interesting...
Yeah, it's very interesting because, as Badi said, I believe in all of the Sikh regiments, Guru Granth Sahib was carried. Not at the forefront of the battle, but what happened was you would have a rotation, And
Although when they were marching, because we have those images.
yeah,
in
but they
the
are
Middle
on
East.
relief at the time.
Yeah.
They're away from the front
The
line.
front line, yeah.
And when they're away from the front line, that's when they are performing all their
And
rituals.
so in the middle of the desert, they would do a prakash.
Yeah,
They'd get the
absolutely.
instruments out and they start doing.
And that picture, I think that image you're referring to, that's in a barn in France,
It is, yeah.
and where they've got the
Wow.
bar and stuff, and they're doing kirtan, and that's away from the front line when they're doing their rotation.
I think
bit.
that
So when they-
spirit kept them going as well.
I
like,
believe so, right?
yeah.
I mean, I personally would find a lot of strength from that, and I'm sure
yeah.
they did, right? And you would from anything that you can,
Yeah.
because quite rightly, as you said, Baji said as well, it was hell on earth.
Yeah.
I think there was nothing like that before
Yeah.
then. Any that type of fighting.
And maybe, I mean, I know that there's been recently a spate of movies being made about 1984, which is fantastic. You know, we are now learning the lessons that if you don't capture your own history, nobody else will. But it would be great if maybe some of the Bollywood producers and maybe worldwide producers began to create some films of the Sikhs in the First World War. I mean,
There is a small part, isn't there, in the English Patient?
oh yeah,
in the English
he's a kind of
Patient.
complex character, isn't he?
But I just want to interrupt at this stage and say there was also a Royal Navy battleship as well called HMS Sikh, which I think was sunk twice. They kept rebuilding it, and there were 3 versions of it.
Yeah.
And I think in the end it was sunk in the Mediterranean
We've
by
actually
by
got
the
the-
Germans.
I think they've actually got
We
some.
got the badge from
Yeah.
this HMS Sikh. We will bring that after the break.
And also,
There you are. Well, actually, there you are. That's a good segue into the break.
So it's nice
so
to
you
go
are
to the
watching
break, yeah.
the one show. It's a very special one show where we are commemorating the 100th anniversary of the First World War and the Armistice Week as well, and particularly the Sikh contribution. We've heard some fantastic contributions.
Yeah,
Manjit,
definitely we
and,
have. I'm
And I was
quite
feeling sad at the
stunned.
beginning, but I feel much more uplifted now. So we will go for a break, and we'll be straight
So
back.
yeah.
And we're gonna. It's an extended show today, so we're gonna go right to 9:15, and maybe we will also try to take some calls as well. So if you'd like, if you've got any questions to ask, then maybe after the break we will take some calls, and we will see the badge as well. So ek minute de bache ਅਸੀਂ ਮੁੜ
So
ਕੇ
we'll see you
ਆਪਣਾ
straight after
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ
the
ਕਾ
break.
ਖਾਲਸਾ,
Khalsa.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Waਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ,
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Welcome to the one show again.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're having a fantastic
Yeah.
discussion. In the second half, Manjit, we'll ask some difficult questions. We've done the easy bit now, yeah? But just before that, and I see later calls, we will take some calls as well. But just before that, we've got some amazing, amazing artifacts, as I said, that have been brought from the National Sikh Museum in Derby. And Gurpal, I know that you wanted to just show us some of these artifacts that you've got, and Tim as well. Maybe just
If you just
briefly-
go through it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other Gripal mentioned about the one of the battleships. There were actually 3 battleships commissioned around. It was I think slightly after the First World War, so up to about 42, 43. There were 3 of them. One was called HMS Sikh. One of them was submarine and 2 battleships. One was called HMS Sikh. One was called HMS Punjabi. The other one was called HMS Sardar.
Wow.
We've actually got the actual badge from the HMS Sikh here.
Can we get that? Can you just bring
Very
it to
big.
the camera?
Uh,
Yeah.
can you-
Focus on the.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
actual badge from the HMS Sikh. Now we've brought some other shoulder badges from the Sikh regiment, the Punjab frontier, and I can show you those badges
Yep.
in a second as well. This is another shoulder badge as well that the Sikh regiment would have, and then we have the actual Sikh regiment badge. As well as the.
Could you just the regiment badge? Has it got any? Can describe it? Has it got any? How?
Yeah, what does it say on there?
This one I can
Has any
describe
writing on
the
it?
khanda. This one.
So
that
it's
you
actually
will
got the
recognize.
khanda.
This this one got khanda and kirpan. This will go.
And on the turban,
dastara.
on the Sikh,
Yes.
Sikh, they would have these on the turban.
They would have
Wow.
bigger ones of these as well, but this is the actual original the Sikh regiment badge. Now earlier you mentioned what was the conclusion from why did the how are the Sikhs loyal and why would they fight, etc. The conclusion was actually British had realised what was working in these guys. It's not them, it's not their bodies, it's actually what is given to them, how they're initiated into
Yeah.
the Sikhi. It's that what they upheld, and that's what kept them going.
Tim, I know you've brought some other artifacts. I know if you want to just tell us a bit about them and maybe just pick them up and.
Yeah, if you just.
Well, this item here is an officer's battle sword.
Yeah.
It's got what you call a battle blade on. So in the early part of the First World War, when he went
So
out,
that's not ceremonial. That would actually be. For
this has got a battle blade on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when he left the trenches, that's what he'd have in the early part of the First World War.
So once you've run out of any ammunition,
Well, no, in the early part it was still gentlemanlike, you know.
hand.
Yeah, with the other German officers.
So what? Tell us something.
Then you've got the standard Mills grenade.
So that's from the First World War.
That's a genuine. That's actually been.
Just watch, be careful with that.
Yeah, make sure you don't do anything
you just
to.
pull that.
I mean,
This
we
is
won't
actually-
get
any of
Carl
the-
Tunnel to last
Yeah.
modern.
This was actually dug up from the battlefield. That
Wow,
was.
that's
So
amazing.
Will that be in Belgium around that?
Yeah. This particular item has been dug up again from the battlefield. There's a German stick grenade.
Okay.
That was only dug up 10 years ago, so that's been in
So
the
what
ground.
do you do with that? Do you pull it from the?
You twist the cap off.
Oh, you twist
and
it.
there'd be, of course, there'd be a piece of string in there which you
Right.
pulled.
And then,
Then you lobbed it quick. yeah. Then,
There's a gun here. Oh, this.
well,
No,
that's
it's
the holster for the 455 Webley and
Scott.
Scott.
Camera?
I hope you haven't got any bullets in there.
Yeah,
Pointing
we've
at
got
me.
6 in.
Is that standard issue? Again, this is officers who would have.
Yeah, standard issue.
Not soldiers. That would be
Officers.
officers.
Yeah. It was nicknamed the Unstopper because, you know, to blow you about that one would.
Okay. And
Very.
then you've got this belt as well.
Yeah, the bandolier, most Indian soldiers had these. Over the
Okay,
breast.
That
yeah.
would be for what?
Full of ammunition for the 303, which was the.
And then there's this sword here as well.
That's the cavalry sword. That is. Well, this is
Tell us
the.
about the gun. Tell us about the Royal Enfield, because that's a very famous weapon.
Yeah, short magazine Enfield. Odds 10 in the magazine, which fit in there 10.
You know, it's funny, the Royal Enfield, because if you go to Punjab now, I think the Punjab police still has the Royal
Yeah,
Enfield.
they do.
Yeah, well that.
Home
yeah.
Guard, remember
Yeah.
Home Guard had
I've
these?
seen them myself.
Well, the short magazine Enfield was the best bolt-action rifle ever made. It was accurate, it was robust, it was simple.
It's
This
practical.
one actually a
yeah.
grenade launcher.
This has got the grenade launcher, but this will unscrew.
And would it be that?
No,
that-
no, that's
it was
German.
Similar shape, yeah.
It was a Mills grenade.
Oh,
You
just
put,
an ordinary grenade.
yeah, you pulled the pin
Oh
in
God!
like that,
Wow.
and then you'd be in the trenches, and then you'd put
Oh,
a
that
charge
part,
round,
yeah.
a charge round in there, and then fire it like that.
That's fantastic. And
Then-
then just tell us about this, because this is like the kind of monster, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
This is a bit like an Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of type of weapon, isn't it?
well, you had the heavy machine gun, which was the Vickers 303, and then you had the medium machine gun, which
So
was
this is the medium, it's not the big one.
no, that's not the big one.
Okay. But that, you won't be carrying that around in the battlefield.
Yeah. You see a lot of Sikh soldiers on the shoulders.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
actually carrying it
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
Another picture you have seen, the Vickers machine gun, which Tim mentioned. We actually have one of those in the museum as well,
Wow.
at the National Sikh Museum, along with these statues of the Sikhs carrying, the Sikh soldiers carrying a European child, saving a European child. Very emotional statues you might have seen.
If you just
That's fantastic. Tim, thanks very much. I mean,
Pleasure.
This
It's been
is
a
only,
pleasure.
I mean, this is, you can sit down now.
Do you just want me to show you
Just-
the
okay.
cavalry sword, because
There you are.
that was actually produced in Birmingham in 1915. This is a 1908 cavalry sword. If you've seen War Horse,
Yeah.
you see them going like that. And that bit was to smack them on the head as well.
I mean, as somebody who's interested in Indian weapons, there's a big distinction between the talwar, which was always curved, and the European swords, which were very straight. I mean, Gurpal, do you know anything? Anybody got any ideas as to what? Was it something to do with the way in which the battle was fought, the style of fighting?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't know enough, but I know the Sikh way of fighting and the swords that they used pre kind of the weaponized modern mechanized. They had a lot of kind of training on how to use those swords, and they use them in a very specific motion. And there are guys in the team who kind of
These seem to be very much about piercing.
They are.
Whereas the
absolutely.
Indian swords are very much about slashing.
Yeah, absolutely, and they will cut.
Okay.
my question is, why have our history been hidden for so many years? I would like to start on my left-hand side.
I think, why have we just woken up
Yeah.
now?
Why is
I think it's when the first immigration, when our elders started coming here to the United Kingdom, they had a lot of responsibility. They worked very hard in the foundries, whatever job they could find. I heard some of these stories from my elders and how they used to live and everything. And truly, throughout the whole history, if we look back at the Sikh history, Sikhs never had the time to write their own history. They always relied on the history to be written. You know, Persians wrote some, British wrote some, and the others. Because any history that we had written, that either got destroyed because we were always fighting. You know, jata jida kehndे ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੋ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਾਗੀ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਰਤਾਜ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਪਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਬਾਹਲਾ ਕੰਮ ਬਾਗੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਾਕਈ ਹੋਇਆ ਜੀ ਜੰਗਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਹੈ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਖੁੰਦੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਸੌਰੀ ਆਈ ਨੋ ਇਟਸ ਨਾਟ ਦਿਸ ਸਬਜੈਕਟ ਪਰ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਖੁੰਦੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਜੋ 84 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਭੁਲੇਖਾ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਾਲ ਤੇ ਜਾਲੀ ਜੁਲੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਐਂਡ 30 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਬਾਅਦ 30 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹਾਲੇ ਵੀ we still haven't got our history that had actually been confiscated from us.
What's our benefit of learning about history?
Gurpal, you're a teacher. Yeah.
I have to agree with Gurpal that I am very disappointed with the quality of what's being taught in the curriculum. When I was growing up, I had absolutely no idea, and I'm someone who thought I knew a thing about Sikh history too. So I knew about the Gurus and I knew about Maharaja Ranjit Singh and all the usual. I didn't have any idea that Sikhs were involved in the World Wars until I think it was until about 1989 or something. I went to a wedding in Nottingham, and there was a small display of Sikhs in the Second World War on the Langar wall, which caught my interest. And then after that there was an exhibition in 1992 at Walsall Museum, which originally came from Bradford, called Warm and Rich and Fearless, where they had weapons and other historical artifacts. And then I think it wasn't until we jumped until 1999, the 300th anniversary of the Khalsa, where the book Warrior Saints came out with Amandeep Singh Madra, Panjit Singh, all the work they had done, which really brought all this together. And it was after that I started doing assemblies in school about it. But just as you have the black teacher doing the Black History Month assembly, it was down to me to do the Sikh assembly, and I'm doing some more later on this year. And none of the staff and none of the students had any idea.
And what kind of response when you do? What do the students say?
They're absolutely amazed that in the midst of us live this community that have had all these historical
So they got
links with
smart,
us, and we don't even know about it, and we thought they just ran corner shops or you know, doctor's surgeries, and that was it. So it's absolutely
Hardeep,
amazing.
I mean, just coming. I mean, we asked you earlier on about the impact, you know, but tell us about some stories about people, the testimonies of people who've seen the exhibition, who maybe for the first time discovered this part of history. You know, it's all our history. You know, what kind of stories are coming out of the exhibition itself?
It's quite difficult to describe because we had a whole mix of people come to the exhibition. We had people like yourselves who are aware and they're looking and they know their history and they want to come.
Because you've been doing tours, haven't you? You've actually been doing guided tours.
I did, yeah. Some, not very well, but we tried. So, and then there were, even amongst people who know their history, the story that we told at the exhibition, they had not heard that narrative. They were also amazed at the numbers, the various contributions, and the kind of the extent of the contribution of the Sikhs in the World War I. Now, I mean, I'll just touch upon one other angle of the history, which I mean, it was new to me, and I didn't know that, and it was, you know, very, very touching for a lot of people who came to the exhibition. Was the story of Princess Sophia Dalip Singh, who was a suffragette at the time. She gave up being a suffragette, got enlisted as a nurse in Red Cross. Then she raised the profile of the Indian soldiers, and she raised funds and everything, and got down to having clothes being stitched for the soldiers who were, you know, Indian soldiers who had come over. You know, a huge amount of effort, and she visited. And
because she was part of royalty, she had lots of leverage with the establishment, and that's why she was pivotal role.
And she was absolutely. And she wrote some very insightful, very, very amazing articles because she was, you know, at that top end of society, and she knew how to leverage press and journalists, and she wrote some really amazing articles about the role of Indians and the.
So there we, you know, I think earlier on we said we were going to ask the question about the role of women, and here is the role of a Sikh woman. She is a descendant of a Sikh Maharaja, who was pivotal
Pivotal.
in that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely pivotal. I mean, she did enormous amount to raise a profile.
Can I just
of
ask
Sikhs.
one other thing? Because I know that when we were at the event last week in the London Assembly building, Ahmad gave us some really interesting statistics about the level of awareness about Sikh contribution in the First World War and Second World War, before, as it were, the exhibition and afterwards. Just tell us about that. It's kind of quite an interesting statistic.
I'll have to admit that I can't recount the stat, but it was an amazing stat. But the number of people who are now aware of the
And these aren't Sikhs; these are the wider.
Yeah, absolutely, our own community, and you know, and it's. I mean, the job's not done yet, right? And it's only the start of the job, the start of the project. We have a long way to go, but the figures are amazing because people who knew about this, the role of our ancestors before the exhibition, before we launched this project, and after, and since then, the awareness is a lot higher, right? And it's a lot higher, and it is through people like yourselves, or the whole community who has been kind of, taking our message and distributing it to people, and more people are coming on board, and more people are coming over and saying, how can we help? How can we contribute? How can we be part of this? And there's a whole team of volunteers that we are training who are. At the City Hall was the launch of the travelling exhibition, which is free to hire and available to people to hire and take, right? To borrow, to show and demonstrate to their own communities and stuff. And we will be taking that.
And it's actually, you took it to India as well.
Yeah, so
it's actually been taken to India, didn't it?
So it's
It's amazing. It is.
I'm not sure if the panels went to India, but they certainly, we were invited by the British High Commission as part of the British delegation, which was hosting the commemorations for the First World War in part of the British High Commission. So, so Amandeep went.
I mean, this is sorry.
Yeah, go on.
This is a tricky question. What's the dangers about our history?
Learning
about it. Sorry,
I mean,
learning about that.
take one thing.
What could be the dangers about our history?
About the truth.
Learning about it.
I think from history, I think we must learn it. Otherwise, we won't forget.
Isn't it about ignorance is bliss?
Could be.
But the thing is that I think it's no danger, but I think we can learn lessons from history. I've looked at the positive side. I won't look at the negative side. As Baji has mentioned, like so many organizations are doing it. Baji is doing a wonderful job. Gurpal Paji is doing amazing job. As a historian, Paji is doing amazing job by bringing us on this panel. I think Carl TV has done a fantastic job today. I won't look at the negative side. I will say, as Sikh, we need to learn from our mistakes. Whatever happened in, like I would say, in what year it happened in 1947, 84, or even before that. I was quite lucky that I got a chance to travel with Ranjit Singh Rana while he was writing his book, Baba Hardas Singh Ji. And Baba Hardas Singh Ji was, I would say, grandfather of Jaswant Singh Ramgarhia Ji. And
a great general of ours.
Yeah. So, but things that, look, when we went to Punjab, like, we still go everything. We went to a Singh there, and he still got all those sword battles from 1857, 1810. But things that we Sikhs are so ignorant. We're quite good at making history, but we never preserve it.
There was an interesting documentary on the TV recently about the the Sikh history. Okay, about the Prince. I forgot what it's called. But there was a discussion there about whether we should return the Kohinoor and the artifacts. Yeah. And generally the argument was that actually if we return them, we'll destroy them. That in Punjab and India, we've been very bad at preserving our history.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, at the museum yourself, I mean, you've collected things that would have gone down the plug hole.
They would have. I think we are obliged to the British what they have done. Have they the artifacts that we have?
Do you think so? Would have probably melted down?
They would have long gone. Yeah. We would have. I was born in Punjab. We used to read about the Khalsa Raj, Sikhan da Raj hunda si upon one time, all the way up to Afghanistan and the northern side touching. Borders of China, and it's very proud to be of. Yeah. But we used to read about these things, but we never. Back of my mind, this is me personally thinking. I always used to think, how did they actually, establish a Raj? What did they used to fight with? Obviously, now we see these guns and we see everything. And ever since the museum come in 5 years back now, when the museum was established in Derby. And it's actually that museum that made me come into Sikhi. I wasn't into Sikhi. And reading my own history, and once I've seen the hard artifacts, yes, truly, कि तोपां जदों ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ when we see these cannons from Maharaj Ranjit Singh, yes there was. Sorry, if I may, I think what you were referring to there, which perhaps didn't get answered, was you were referring to the history. Okay, what are the dangers?
Well,
Yeah.
because there's two sides to history, isn't there?
Yeah. I think my understanding would be the danger is when, for example, I'll give you the fresh example, 1984. Now, all our history got confiscated from there, didn't get burned. Now, that will get released in years to come. Once those elders who know about that history, they will release that history, these people, and that will be twisted. And that is precisely what happened before as well. And the best way to judge the history, what I learned from a really good point from someone, was whatever you read, you always tulana karo Granth Sahib, Guru Granth Sahib. Okay, does that see fit with the Guru Granth Sahib? If it does, that is true. If it's not, then it's
Well,
not.
I mean, Harpal, you mentioned earlier on that your own ancestors were involved in the Kamagata Maru and the Gadar party, yeah? And this is another interesting dimension, comment on this, that in history, sometimes we found ourselves fighting on opposite sides.
Absolutely.
So in India, you've got Captain Mon Singh fighting with the Indian National Liberation Army in Burma and 25,000 soldiers, of which I think 18,000 were Sikhs. Yet at the same time, you've got Sikhs fighting to defend the British Empire in Europe and in the deserts of the Middle East. How do we kind of square the circle?
We can't, right? And that's part of that's as you mentioned. We have to face facts, and we have to look ourselves in the mirror. And whatever we find, we have to balance it with the truth, right? And we have to make sure it adds up. And it's a conflicted story. It's not a simple story. As many people in Punjab were fighting for the empire, there were as many that were opposed.
Yeah. Especially after 1919 and the
after
Amritsar
1919, absolutely, right? There's a pivotal point. It was a point where it was the freedom struggle was ignited, and interestingly, it was just after the war ended, or it was ending. And it hadn't happened before. I mean, had it happened before?
I think we did promise the viewers that we would take, and I've got a call, so we'll take that, and then maybe Gurpal could come back on this discussion. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Hello.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਹੋ
ਮੈਂ ਪ੍ਰਭਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੋਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਫਰੋਮ ਵਾਟਫੋਰਡ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
north of London very interesting show commendable ਦੋ points of view ਰੱਖਣੇ ਸੀ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ we keep saying that the Sikhs fought for Britain. I'd like to put forward the view that it wasn't just Britain they fought for. It was for the free world. In fact, they were fighting for Europe. They fought in France and Belgium and all sorts of places. So they were fighting for more than just Britain. They were fighting for the freedom of Europe. So having said
Excellent.
that, in terms of, there's just two quick contrasting stories with regard to my father, who was also in the Guinea Rifles during the Second World War. And when we first came to the country back in the early 70s from Africa, we were visiting on holiday. We drove in Wales and stopped by at a remote country sort of pub restaurant for a lunch break. As soon as he entered in the pub, we noticed that there was a Welshman sitting in the corner of the pub, and he happened to look up and immediately saw my father with his full turban and beard. He stood up, went to attention, marched over to my father, and he saluted my father and shook hands with him.
That's
Wow.
phenomenal.
that is
And he asked my father, he says, "Do you know why I have saluted you?" And my father, obviously having been in the army, he said, "Yes, I know. I think you've been in the war and have come across Sikh soldiers." He said, "Exactly."
Rob
He
Kirat
said,
Singh Ji.
I have never come across a braver race, and I am honored to meet a Sikh.
Rob
you know, since-
That's phenomenal.
That's an amazing story.
I want to share my story as well. A few years, I'm taking some license here. Exactly same as that. A few years ago, I went to Ypres, in Belgium, for to see the sites and to the last post ceremony. And when we were at the Menam Gate, they have the last post, and the soldiers come there from all over Europe. And we were with a group of Sikhs, and there was this gentleman, he must be about 65 years old, and he'd brought some scouts with him, English gentleman, and he was in tears. Yeah, and he came up to me, and he said, "If you don't mind, I'd just like to share something with you." And I said, "Yes." And I said, "You're in tears. You must have lost maybe your father or grandfather or somebody in the war." And that's and he says, "No, that's not why I'm in tears." He said, "I'm in tears because I'm meeting some Sikhs." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said that my grandfather used to write letters to me about these brave warriors who he fought along. He was in the Sikh regiment, and I don't know. He said he actually died in the trenches here. And I used to read his letters about these brave Sikhs, and I never met them. Today I've met some of those brave Sikhs, and that's why I'm in tears. Because those stories that my grandfather told me have come to life, and I want to thank you. So that was just phenomenal. Let's take another call, and then we will come back. We've got until 9:15 today, so we have got an extended show.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ
ਮੈਂ ਸੁਰਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੋਲਦਾ ਜੀ
ਅੱਛਾ ਜੀ ਵਿਚਾਰ
ਕਿਹੜੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਜੀ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ
ਮੈਂ ਮਿਡਨਾਈਟ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਬੋਲਦਾ
ਅੱਛਾ ਜੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਦੱਸੋ ਬੱਚਨ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੱਸੋ ਜੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਨਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ ਦੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਫਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਅਰਲੀ 250,000 ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਲੜੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ Italians were ruling over Ethiopia and Somalia and they had to surrender to the Sikh army. Do you know that?
What's the source of this, Sajid Singh? It's a very, very powerful bit of history.
Sorry?
What is your source for this evidence or this historical reality?
Because my relations were fighting over there.
I see. So it's been something that's been as a part of your family.
Part of my family, and my when Italians were surrendered, and then they fought against Rommel.
Yeah.
German general, and then they went into Italy, and they fought close to Monte Cassino.
Yeah. I mean, I think Harpal might be able to give us. Sorry, Hardeep. There is some in the exhibition. There is some pictures and some of that. The Italian
and
kind
not
of
many
theatre.
people mentioned about Somalia and Ethiopia. They fought over there as well.
Well, that is another area of research that maybe we can ask the UK Punjab Heritage Association to look into.
Yeah, because there was a program going on in Sunrise Rodeo about 15-16 years ago, and that was mentioned. I mentioned it on a program, and Ms. Fletcher was listening as well.
Yeah.
And she said, because there's a lot of sacrifice has been done by the Sikh people, and she might take the case to the House of Lords. That's about 15-16 years ago.
Yeah. Do you know what happened? Did it ever appear? Or
yeah, because I mentioned to them because the Sikhs fought in World War I, II, and there's no memorial, and it's shame, because we didn't have a memorial for the Sikh people who fought for this country.
Okay, so Jeet Singh Ji, thanks very much, and that's something else that maybe our guests could discuss, whether we do need some kind of permanent memorial. I mean, there's a memorial in Brighton. There
are memorials.
Thanks very much, Jeet Singh.
Thank you.
But I would urge Paji to please put their, all the viewers, if they have stories like that,
the Citizen
please
Historian
add
Project,
them to our database. Get online on empirefaithwar.com and add them, and then we can help you research. And we've got a team of experts in research who will look at every single fact and balance it up and make sure the figures and everything adds up, and we can help research further and find.
And that is important, Gurpali. It's really important. If we are wanting to claim our history, we have to have provenance. We have to have objectivity. Otherwise, people don't take you seriously. Is that right?
There has to be hard legacy of. Sorry, you were talking about memorials earlier. May I just go back? I'll come back to this.
Yeah.
I would like to say thank you for reminding us, the gentleman from Watford, what they said.
Yeah.
How the Sikhs actually fought for not just Britain, but the Europe, but they've also fought for the French. French that actually banned the same turban that they were recruiting when they needed them. And years down the line, some years back, they had banned the same turban that the Sikhs not allowed to wear.
Okay, we've got another caller. We'll just take it before. So, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ
Oh, hello, good evening. My name is Shanta Rao. I am calling you from Halifax.
What is your name?
My name is Shanta.
Shanta.
Shanta Rao, and I I am calling because I found your show extremely interesting because I'm also doing a project from our company, from the Indian dance company called the Annapurna Indian Dance, and we are doing a project called The Unknown Becomes the Known, which is all about the contribution of undivided Indian soldiers to the World War. And I was quite impressed by the amount of work, amount of information that I got from your show, and I'm quite interested to know more. And if you could please put on this information about the website, and that would really help. And also, if there is anyone here in Yorkshire, if there are any relatives or anyone, we could go and talk to them, and we can celebrate. The
Chantal,
contribution they have
that
made.
definitely. If you leave your contact details, we'll get back to you. Maybe leave your email, but also there is actually quite a lot of useful information. If you go to the Cartwright Hall Museum in Bradford, in Lister Park, they've got a whole archive there. And if you go to the Royal Armouries in Leeds, they've got again a whole archive of Sikh weaponry. So there is a lot actually. In fact, Yorkshire has given us a lot in terms of archival material. But and maybe we could get you on the programme as well to talk about your dance company and how you're trying to.
Yes, we are we're all geared up now in this duty to our forefathers, and we are really working hard and doing a lot of research to do our very best to pay our homage to our ancestors.
That's fantastic.
To our brave ancestors, and I'm very proud that the Sikh community have become so responsible and doing this show. And our board of directors, Mrs. Chaitanya Shaw, said that please go and see the show. They are talking about the Sikhs and the contribution they've made, and I'm really impressed, and I'm really so proud of our ancestors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
much.
Thank you for your call. Hanji Jagmohan Singh ji. Waheguru ji ka khalsa. Waheguru ji ki fateh.
I just want to add that a few years ago when I was still serving in the army, our army actually tried to spread this word, not just about Sikhs only, about Hindu brothers, about Muslims, about all the ethnics who actually fought in World War I and II. I used to go around the country with about 10 ethnic soldiers, because they set up this special team to go around the country in like attending school, colleges, carnivals, anything like gurdwaras, mosques, churches, So the exhibition called We Were There. And I go so many stories. I remember like a lady came to me, like actually she kissed my forehead and cried, like you mentioned your story, your party mentioned his, So army actually, I'm sure a few years back, they wanted more Sikhs to come and join the army.
They did.
I'm sure Paji is still working quite closely to.
The exhibition that you're mentioning, we were there. The Ministry of Defence actually gave us this exhibition. It's permanently displayed, which shows the contribution, not just the Sikhs, but all ethnic minorities, from the Hindu background, Muslim background, and the others as well. So everyone's contribution, the Commonwealth contribution into the First and Second World War. And as far as the recruitment, we've got the recruitment coming to the National Sikh Museum on the 30th of this month. They are still willing, they are doing their best. It's actually down to us, and that we want, the history to be taken forward.
Hardeep, we've had a phenomenal response to today's programme. In fact, I've just been told in my people phoning in asking for the website details again. So if you could just slowly tell them about the details of the general website, but also the project of the citizen historian.
So ਹਾਂਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੇਰ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੂਗਲ 'ਚ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ Empire Faith War, ਪਰ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ empirefaithwar.com.
So one word and then
one word.com. ਪਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੂਗਲ 'ਚ ਸਰਚ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਸਾਡਾ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਟੌਪ ਤੇ I think ਆਏਗਾ ਸਰਚ ਇੰਜਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ.
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ.
But just wanted
the
to
link
pick
to
up
the citizen history.
It's on there. It's on there. Everything's on there, and I just wanted to pick up, the previous caller as well. That the story that we are telling is a Sikh story, which is a subset of Punjabi story, and the Punjabi story, which is a subset of the Indian story. The undivided India contribution was 1.3 million combatants in the World War I, right? And that is sum total more than Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, and white South African.
But it was the largest army in the history of the world, wasn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah, the Indian Missionary Army.
It was the largest contribution outside of the British contribution. So it was it was the biggest volunteer army that participated,
That's right.
which is quite significant, right? And about half, just under half of the 1.4 million Indians were the Punjabis, right? And that was a major,
is
that was a huge. I mean, 1 in 6, every 1 in 6 soldier was from the subcontinent, and that is huge, and we should not forget that. And you know, I mean, we along with others are trying our best to do what we can to preserve and create that history.
I mean, I don't know who wants to pick this one up, but you know, we've gone from this amazing, glorious history where we were not only were we defending ourselves, but we were defending freedom, fight against fascism, and that was in the letters. You know, one of the things that inspired those Sikh soldiers, well, we're going to fight Hitler, we're going to fight Mussolini. We've gone from that to a tragic Punjab, to a Punjab where the youth of Punjab now seems to have just kind of rotting away. Is there a connection? You know, we lose our history, we lose our sense of direction. Is that Gurpal? Is that something that you would say is definitely connected?
I would certainly agree with that. Just as the Sikh contribution isn't really taught in the British schools, and we spend more time doing about Egyptian history and pharaohs.
Yeah, I was
and,
going to say that.
Greeks and so on. In the same way, it's not taught in the Indian Punjab.
I mean, Saragari is interesting. In fact, there was a conspiracy by the Indian authorities to deny the even event of Saragari, because this was obviously an uprising against the British Empire, what the Sikhs helped to put down.
Right, okay.
So that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Right, but that is basically.
And there's no memorial to this day. There's no memorial, as far as I know.
Apart from the Saragari Gurdwara.
Yeah, but no official Indian memorial to Saragari.
No.
Okay, we've got another call. Hanji.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ
ਹਾਂਜੀ I'm Rajinder speaking from Coventry.
ਅੱਛਾ ਜੀ ਦੱਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਰੱਖੋ
I'm really enjoying your show, and the thing is, everybody knows nowadays that Sikhs have fought in the World War I and II, and have also served in the forces. But I just want to give a small little message. The thing is, nowadays, if you're asking Sikhs, the youngsters, to join the British Armed Forces, what they're saying, straight away no. So that's my question.
Well, Jagmohan, who's served in the army, will be able to tell you something about that.
Okay, yeah, I know he served in the army. I've seen his photographs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rajinder, for your call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As I mentioned earlier, actually, I got this chance to travel around the country, and my main role was to go around the gurdwaras and the schools. So the army used to make this strategy, like, you know, so many Sikhs are living in the area. So they used to send, not just me, but there was about 6 of us. So actually, I came across that, I think there were a couple of concerns. One was like the army policy says, like, if there's a nuclear NBC warfare, nuclear biological, so the army policy is that you have to shave it off. So there
are all these barriers in place still.
Actually, in my army career, I actually went to the NBC chamber. I mean, they only use CS gas there, but it's hard to enter that chamber. Yeah, so I actually passed that test about 10 times. So that was one of the main concerns. There was another few minor concerns about helmet and stuff. But actually, and there was another one. The main question they used to ask me about racism. And about equality. I remember I was on a military exercise in Salisbury Plain, you know, for 10 days, and I did my Nitnem in the morning. I was sleeping I was in woods, you know, with my fellow soldiers, and my troop commander came to me and he said, "Why didn't you mention it's Vaisakhi today?" I actually never told my troop commander, but actually my troop commander was doing research about Sikhi. But I remember there was a guy I met in Afghanistan. Initially, I thought he's a bit racist, and I will admit on air. But after a few days, actually, I realized that actually he was every time anyone came to see us in Camp Bastion, he was asking them, "Do you know who was Char Sahibzade, Mata
God.
Guji?" So a voice
amazing.
All about the history
like, I
again,
never told anyone, like, so. I think there are concerns. There are, but I think there's a gap. You know, like I respect Captain Makan Singh big time, because I think he or his father was the first Sikh to join after 1947. He's still serving as a captain.
So you know, we are running out of time now, but I know that there's a campaign as well, and Prince Charles has supported this campaign. I think the Anglo-Sikh Heritage Trail have been campaigning to try and re-establish Sikh regiments within the British Army.
I think Harbinder Singh Rana ji did it, because I've worked with him,
but there are problems with that, because it would be contravening the the equality and human rights legislation.
What about Welsh and Scottish and all that?
Yeah, well, it's the definition of what is a Sikh, but that's another show, another time, and I will bring Rabindranath. So we are now coming to the end of the show. So I think we just Manjit, we just go around everybody, maybe just say. We'll start with you, Gopal. Any last thoughts?
My last thoughts are.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's take the call and then we'll go around to ask them.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people interested to this. So.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਦੱਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਨਾਂ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ
ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਜੀ ਕੁਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਪੁੱਲਰ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਹਰਸਵੀਰ ਤੋਂ ਬੋਲਦਾ ਹਾਂ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਦੱਸੋ
ਪੁੱਲਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੋਗੇ
ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਮੈਂਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਇੰਨੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਸੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਲੰਡਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਪਾਰਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਗਏ ਸੀ 5 ਜਣੇ it was one of the most interesting and emotional exhibitions I've ever seen in my life as being a Sikh. And the way you presented it, you should be commended, and we hope you can do more tours like that. In the end, I would like to say that inspired us so much that we are now going to make a Sikh memorial in Huddersfield in a public park, and it's going to be a
Bole
Sonihal Sat Sri Akal.
Puller Sahab, this is a really inspirational step that you've taken. You know, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Vaiguru
ji ka khalsa, Vaiguru ji ki fateh.
So here are the seeds, you know, from 1 acre, you know, we are sowing seeds, and I think that's the thing. But it's important that we have a healthy, as it were, a healthy tree. And then that tree can sow healthy acorns. I think we've diseased our own essence, and that's one of the problems but we are now strengthening again. So as we are coming to the end of the program, Gurpal Singh ji, any final thoughts summing up some of the issues we've been talking today?
Yeah, I think the reason why the youngsters are not interested because they haven't read the history properly. They don't know, you know, that we are truly a martial race. And looking at our Gurmani, I'll finish with that pankti. कि सूरा सो पहचानिया जो लड़े दीन का हित पुरजा पुरजा कट मरा कबहू ना छाड़ा खेत.
So that was Guru Nanak Dev Ji.
That was Guru Nanak Dev Ji. People think it's from Guru Gobind Singh Ji, but reading from Guru Nanak Dev Ji.
So just war. We are just warriors. Yeah. Tim, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that other people are finding out about the Sikhs. I mean, I've known about them for a long time, and you know, it's nice to know what good soldiers they were in both world wars. And it's nice to know that the young ones are learning this.
Okay, that's great. Gurpal Singh Ji, final comments.
There's a lot more work to be done on the education side still at the moment. Virtually all the history textbooks used in schools have photos of white soldiers. So there's a lot of work to be done. My son, you know, he's come back from school where they've looked at the First World War. Again, no mention of Sikhs or anybody else. So for us teachers, there's a lot of work to do.
And let's get Saragadi into the curriculum.
We're working on it. We're working on it. Thank you.
Hardeep.
So I'm just going to pick up on that point because one of the outputs of the 3-year project is our school's curriculum that we're producing for all the schools, which will be free and available to everybody to use, and that's being produced by some educational specialists with the material that we're collecting. High quality material, high output, inspiring. We are also.
Will you come back on the channel to share some of that?
Glad, absolutely, anytime, right? So, and now that I know where it is, and the one of the other things, I mean, the lasting legacy we want to leave, and I think it's quite fitting that our ancestors left us a legacy in this country, due to which you've had experiences wherever you guys have been, and people have come to you, and we have a duty to protect, and we have a duty to kind of document that and ensure what we leave is just as inspiring and as you know, as beautiful as what our ancestors left us.
Jagmohan Singh Ji, last 20 seconds.
Yeah, just want to recommend one thing. You know, month of November, all Gurdwara, you know, if they can provide 4 pieces to Sikh, all the Sikhs, I think that will spread the awareness. You know, like I never knew about Battle of Saragadi till I joined the army myself. So I think we need to do a lot, especially like yourself, like you did a fantastic job today. But like we need more documentaries or maybe some more shows about the Sikh community. Yeah, thank you.
That's fantastic. Manjeet, last words.
If you lose your history, you lose yourself.
Absolutely, and you know, we see what's happened to the youngsters in Punjab. They're getting lost because they've forgotten what a great contribution they had in history. I'm just going to finish with Sir Winston Churchill's a quote from Sir Winston Churchill. His recognition for the invaluable contribution of Sikhs, and this is what he said. He said, British people are highly indebted and obliged the Sikhs for a long time. I know that within this century we needed their help twice in 2 world wars, and they did help us very well. As a result of their timely help, we are today able to live with honour, dignity and independence. In the war they fought and died for us, wearing their turbans. This is Sir Winston Churchill. So, you know, this is, if you needed some evidence of the contribution, there you are. So time is up here, but please support the Akal channel. If you think we're trying to do something good, if you think this show was valuable, then support us and we can do more things. So, ਇੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।